We got Ryan Abraham here. We appreciate Ryan stopping by from Inside Troy. Ryan, how's it going?
It's pretty good. It's been a while. How you doing, man?
Absolutely. It's been a while. And I know you had to go on a basketball run with the ladies, and they did quite well, but fell a bit short. But we remind everyone that 247 Sports is the place to be with Ryan and the rest of the crew, USCFootball.com. All right, Ryan, this quarterback situation to me is pretty intriguing because to most people, they just, I think, assume that Jayden Maiava is going to be the starting quarterback, and maybe he is, but Houston Longstreet obviously is a guy that's a five-star. And then the journey of Sam Heward as a former five-star who's been all over the map, for him to land at USC, and he's an interesting prospect as well.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting room. We unfortunately don't get to watch a lot of them throwing the football in the spring. We can see them throwing like routes on air, so we get a little bit. But I've covered Houston Longstreet for a while. He was at the Polynesian Bowl out in Hawaii, and he ended up throwing I think it was a 78-yard ball. So he actually won that competition for strongest arm. There's a lot of upside there, and I think if you watch him at Corona Centennial, people love his game and think it could be suited for what Lincoln Riley likes to do when you have some mobility with the quarterback and things like that. But everyone that I've talked to, the initial feeling is like he's going to be good, but it's probably not a walk in and start day one sort of thing. And then you mentioned like a Sam Heward. I'm guessing he's going to be in like kind of a backup battle for the second quarterback spot there. He didn't really get an opportunity last year in Utah, but it felt like that wasn't really a football thing. There's some optimism there, and then his uncle is going to be the quarterback coach, Luke Heward. So there's some relatives in the room. Maybe it'll help him out a little bit. But people I've talked to at Washington still really liked his game. And is it one of those cases where it's a situation where he's never really got to show what he could do? So I think there's some optimism that he could do something, but outside of going and getting a starting quarterback in the portal, you just have to feel like Jayden Maiava is going to be the guy. He went 3-1 since he took over as a starter, from Miller Moss last year. But if you watch the bowl game against Texas A&M, there was like more than 3 quarters that he looked pretty bad in the game, and they end up winning it anyway. So I think for Lincoln Riley, if you feel confident in Jayden Maiava being the guy, it's going to be about let's limit the downside. There's a lot of upside there, but you can't have back-to-back 100-yard pick sixes against Notre Dame and the Coliseum, things like that. So limit some of that, and then they'll feel pretty good about it. But the fact that they didn't go get a quarterback, it kind of gives me, it makes me feel that Lincoln Riley thinks that they can work with Jayden Maiava and really make him the kind of quarterback they want him to be.
Yeah, Ryan, as soon as you mentioned the extremes, I immediately thought of the Notre Dame game. They had a shot, they're in the red zone, they're down a score, and then boom, 2 pick sixes back to me. And so it's interesting also to me that obviously Lincoln Riley has a quarterback track record that's unmatched in the sport if you go back to Oklahoma. And if you look at the last 3 guys, you got Caleb Williams, who was obviously the number 1 selection in the NFL draft, a Heisman Trophy winner, could carry the offense on his back. And probably if he doesn't get hurt, they're in a college football playoff. And then you go back to Miller Moss, who's going to operate the offense as scheduled, take the drop, make the read, make the throw. Now we're back to Jayden Maiava, who's more of the Caleb Williams type. So obviously Lincoln Riley has to determine, play calling, how that fits the strengths and weaknesses there.
Yeah, he does. And it's funny that you mentioned the track record. I mean, for a head coach in college football to get a number 1 overall pick is a big deal. And the fact that Riley's got 3 of them and the most that's ever happened is kind of wild. But then, there was a drop off with Miller Moss, and you almost got a feeling like sometimes coaches want to prove something. You're like, oh, well, you've run with like Kyler Murray or like, even Baker Mayfield was athletic. And Miller Moss wasn't athletic. He just wasn't that kind of dynamic athlete. And you almost felt like, okay, we're going to show we can win with this type of quarterback. And obviously that didn't really work out. And even for Maiava, there's some athleticism there. You thought he might take off and run more, and they've kind of limited that. We haven't seen him really do as much and try to make plays with his legs. And especially if you're a quarterback that sort of struggles and he's made some bad decisions sometimes, take it off and run. A lot of times that can just kind of fix a few things. So I'm curious to see if they let him run a little bit more, or if that's going to be a bigger part of the offense going forward and how it works. But his skill set's a little closer to some of those other quarterbacks you mentioned that Riley had worked with.
Ryan Abraham here from USCFootball.com. It's 247 Sports platform for USC, and this is the guy that started it all there. So he's been around for a long, long time covering USC football there at 247 Sports.